Welcome back to Building Balance, the podcast where we help young men build fulfilling lives through self leadership, purpose, and connection. Today's episode is about something that builds men long before the world notices them: family. My guest, Willem Pennings, is an executive advisor, organizational leader, and someone I deeply respect and who's deeply committed to values based leadership. He's spent years helping companies grow through strategic clarity, but what drives his work is far more personal: his commitments to faith, marriage, discipline, and the institution of family. We talk about growing up, choosing your path intentionally, leading in the workplace, and what running can teach you about life. If you've ever wondered what it really means to be a man who leads in his marriage, in his faith, in his work, this conversation is for you. We're talking about building endurance in a noisy world and why family might be the greatest leadership training ground of all. So let's get started. Hi, Willem. Thank you for being on the show.
No, it's my absolute pleasure, Marmik, and good to see you again. And yeah, it's really a privilege to have this conversation.
Likewise. I've been looking forward to this one because we had the chat before, and I was thinking about so these values, and especially I wanted to do an episode about the institution of family. And you literally said these words, so I thought, okay, I found the right guest for this. So thank you. So before we get into it, how about you tell us a bit about yourself for an audience who would like to know more about you?
Yeah, I have a great many roles in life. I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm a husband, I'm a father, a friend, hopefully to many. But obviously that describes my personal life, and that is something that's very important to me. That is, I would say, my main purpose in life is to be part of my family and do what needs to be done. But next to that, professionally, I've been part of BTS for the past 17 years. Had many different roles, many different positions, but what's most notable is that I've always been involved with client work, working across different industries, across different clients, but mainly in financial services. And there I really help my clients to change and transform, to execute strategy, or with executive leadership development challenges that they're facing. I've been doing that for the past 17 years. Yeah, that has really professionally shaped who I am today.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So I already know that because what we hear, what we see, it's mostly about the professional life. And that's something of a very common thing that we look at these days. But for our audience, the main purpose of this episode is to dive deep into the back end of things where the values come from, what we do, how we do at our workplace and in life, because it all goes back to your upbringing, your childhood, and your values. So, without further ado, let's start with where it all began. Looking back on your upbringing, what were the values or people that shaped how you see responsibility and manhood?
You know that when you asked this question before, it triggered a lot of emotions. Reflecting on this because it's about people that obviously, my parents, my grandparents, who are a big part of my life. I think the first 8 to 9 years of my life, I was with my grandparents on a daily basis. And these were people of strong faith, people with high integrity. The institution of family is everything. And therefore, yeah, that has really shaped me. I think my grandfather has maybe been one of the strongest role models, even subliminally, if I reflect on it now as a mature, being a father myself now, not yet the correct father, hopefully not for a very long time. Reflecting on this now, I think he's actually maybe the person who had the biggest impact on me, and just because of the way he carried himself, but the example he set. And yeah, I think in my household, I think my father, my dad, but also my mom and my grandmother. I come from a family where, for example, my mom has 7 sisters and a couple of brothers, where my dad also has a lot of sisters and a couple of brothers. So it's a family where women are definitely in a position where yeah, they're dominant in a way, if I can put it like that. And that has also very much shaped who I am today. Very strong, yeah, minded women. So yeah, that's where the values come from. I've therefore always had a humongous amount of respect for people. I think one of the things I also was gonna share with you is that my grandparents, they looked after people, but also they respected each and everyone, no matter what walk of life you had. I also remember my grandmother always, handing out food or money to the less fortunate people, which had a big impact on me as a kid. But even now, as an adult, I can still see that I have some of those values because my moral compass
Yeah.
is really shaped by those moments in my life where I saw my grandparents, do charity, be good citizens of the world, care for the less fortunate amongst us. And yeah, that and they treated everyone with respect, whether it was the bus driver, whether it was, one of my dad's colleagues coming home from work, my school teachers. They always carried themselves with a lot of respect. And I always say you get respect if you give it, right?
Yeah.
And that was something I learned from them at a young age. So I think my value system is definitely shaped by my upbringing and by my family, for sure. I've been very fortunate in that sense that that's also where my identity in a way comes from.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I think this, because I have a 8-month old daughter, I am very conscious about these topics these days, especially. And everything that you do, everything that the child sees since the beginning, since they start understanding the world, observing the world, one of the first things children do is mimic what they see, right? And when you have strong values around you, people behaving in those manners, it instills those values in you, in your subconscious, and you don't even know. Your psychology is being built, and then later in life, you're doing those things, and when you start to think about that, and you remember, my father used to do it, my grandfather used to do it, maybe that's why I'm doing it. So it has a direct impact on how we lead our lives. So linking this to your roles, so you work in high stake corporate environments, right? How has your personal story, not your title, influenced how you lead?
Wow, that's a very, very profound question. I think in life I've learned you need to be you, and you need to be the best version of yourself. And at least that's the goal, right? And I personally live a very purposeful life, so the steps I make need to be meaningful, and therefore at work I need to be myself, and I need to lead with a high, amount of integrity. And that's also what I learned from my upbringing already. Both my grandparents are very mixed backgrounds. So my grandfather is originally descendant from Africa, came to Suriname, or his ancestors, obviously not free of will, but a very proud, a person who really values knowledge, a really respectable person. And I think my mom came to Holland as an immigrant. And that really, in a way, is also a bit of a burden, right? Because you get programmed to work, to make yourself useful. And that really, I think both me and my siblings, we have that instilled in us because, there's a high degree of work ethic. And, you care for your environment. You do things at the level where it's excellent. And work is a very important thing, right? Because it's almost your social status, right? And whether I agree with this approach or not, right? Now that I'm an adult, that's what was given to me because I remember one time bringing home a report card as the very young Willem,
Okay.
maybe for a lack of a better word, back then a bit of a troubled Willem. And I think on my second year of high school, and I had a couple of insufficient grades. And that's the moment I realized where my parents were putting the standard, and especially my mom, right? Where she was like, your, and I don't ever think I brought an insufficient grade home again. And I flunked one exam in uni and I didn't tell them because I didn't care, you know. But just to show you the sense of excellence. And I think the reason why I link it also to my grandparents, having the background they had, my grandmother originates from India. It means something to be somebody, right? And everything has to evolve towards that. So, and there was a high degree of expectation, high expectation, and yeah, and that has shaped who I am, how I lead, and I'm happy for that as well because I was not a stranger to hard work.
Yeah.
Both my mom and my dad worked very hard. I'd seen my uncles, my aunts work very hard, working themselves up to be somebody. So I've understood the value of hard work, but I've also understood the value of doing things at an excellent level. My brother is actually a big role model in my life when it comes to that. He, at the age of 15, told my parents, and actually he was maybe the most gifted one from a study point of view. Studying came easy to him, but he wanted to become a chef. And my dad didn't like that. My dad was like, you're gonna become a doctor, a dentist, or something like that. And he became a chef, but he became a hell of, he's really a good chef. You know, he worked at Michelin star restaurants, big resorts, at very prestigious cruise liners. But it goes to show that if you have the right attitude, the right work
Yeah.
ethic, you can take it far in life. And the one thing I will also say to you that I've learned from my upbringing that is now a part of how I lead is I respect people. And more importantly, wherever I go, what culture they are, what religion they have, I respect who they are fully. And I've learned that from my parents. I learned that from my grandparents. Because, you know, I'm from a very multicultural mixed background. My father is Dutch, right? I've learned how important that is, and I've traveled the world for BTS. I've been in a very privileged position where, you know, I go from A to B. I've been on worked on every continent for BTS, and that has been something I really have taken with me throughout my life. That my parents taught me is to, you know, treat people with respect and learn from other people, understand who they are.
Yeah. And I think this part, not many people focus on this, but when you have that respect in your heart, when you do not have these biases in your mind that you see certain people in a certain way in that bubble of your whatever that may be, you start to learn. They can surprise you. The you looked some people look down upon, but then they have something so much to offer that you're missing out on it if you're not meeting them with an open heart, with an open mind, right? But then, and not just that, not just corporate world, but
In life.
in life
Yep.
you see that that's a very common thing, right? But when you open your heart, when you open your mind, the world, the people around you surprise you, right? and
Absolutely.
and maybe it's something that helps you build meaningful connections as well, right?
It's one of the greatest gifts I think we get as human beings, right? But
Yeah.
to your point, are you open to it? And are you willing to learn and to absorb what other people have to offer? And of course, you're not going to agree with everyone. You're not going to like
Yeah.
everything, but respect takes you a long way, right? And any great relationship is based on mutual understanding and on trust.
Yeah.
If you get to be there, you need to be open to that person and you need to understand that. And I learned in my household how important that is. You know, by having, you know, I looked around. I was looking at a picture this morning that my cousin sent me because my nephew graduated on Tuesday. And you literally see all colors of the rainbow, but also I know my family well, right? But we're all very unique individuals. And that's just my family. Just imagine the world, right? So to your point, I think it's really a great gift if you're able to be open to these things and, you know, and engage.
Yeah. Talking about relationships, to my favorite topic, let's talk about something we both care about. So the institution of family, right? You've spoken about family as more than personal, as a cultural and spiritual institution. So,
Family is everything.
family is everything. I totally agree. So, what do you mean by that? Why put so much emphasis on this? In the like in this modern world, where we see people throwing it away as divorce rates rising, people making a mockery out of relationships, and that facet of life being celebrated, where it's all fun and games, but relationships are not given that much value. So, in this world, why do you give so much value to it? What do you mean by, yeah, it's
You
right?
know, yeah, it's a very important topic we're now starting to discuss, and very close to my heart, as you know. I think we're all not perfect human beings, right? We're all not, you know, our lives are complex at times. But I do feel that the institution of family is, in a way, sacred, right? Because this is really where you look to your family members and you see yourself, right? And that's what I've experienced. Do I always agree with my parents? Do I think my parents are perfect? No, but it is very important in life that, you make an effort to understand each other and to come together. And ultimately, you have to do it together. I also think it's sacred because if God wanted it any other way, it would be different, right? So, my parents are my parents for a reason. I also think love is sometimes mistaken for some weird feeling and, oh, I need to have a feeling. But for me, love is an action, right? So the institution of family, and for it to stay and remain sacred, it depends on how you act. Now, if you're young, you can make mistakes. And I've made many mistakes, right? And I'm not perfect. And even at this age, I find it incredibly hard sometimes. I have older parents. My dad is 90, turned 90 last March. My mom is in her 80s. And now with them becoming older, maybe a bit more stubborn, they're still in the house where I was born and raised, and my brother and I have to do a lot to make that happen, and it's tough, but we love them, and love, that action is to take care of them, is to make sure we can listen to their wishes and respect that as well.
Yeah.
And that's not easy, but if you love people, nobody said it was going to be easy.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, I think, the institution of family, it's also what you make of it. And therefore, it's very important how you treat each other, right? And that's where the value system comes in. I'll tell you a great story. I saw my dad taking care of his family. So he gave me a very good example of how it should be done. He went to see his mom every day. He fed his mom when she couldn't anymore. He took care of her when she couldn't anymore. He was with her to the very bitter end. She was 94 at the time. I remember him carrying his mother, right? So long story very short, that is what real love is, right? And that's not easy. That's the tough stuff in life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then if you look at your children, you look at all these other aspects of life, you can be their friend and you can have a nice time with them all the time, but that's not going to make them strong,
Yeah. Yeah.
purpose driven individuals. So answering your question, I think this is a very tough thing, but it's the most important thing for me because it's where you derive your identity from, and therefore also who you bring in your family, who becomes your family. It's almost sacred.
Yeah, yeah, and this is I'm so happy we're discussing this topic, because young people especially need to know this version of life. What they're seeing on social media, it's totally different. Even so, a lot of your upbringing, your values, take from apart from your surroundings. You take that from the things that you watch. So back in our times, we didn't have access to smartphones like this, like you're
I have
always.
3 TV channels, just to be clear. I think the first 8 years of my life.
Yeah. And one of that must be the cartoon one. So these days, even children, young mothers who were not, uh, how would you put it, were not like older mothers, they would give them smartphones, and on the smartphones, children are watching different things, and that's what's in a way raising them. They're getting information from that, they're observing that. So we watched a lot of movies as well. Back in those times, movies were about these topics. Now it's not. You rarely see the value of family in such movies. The other aspects, I don't want to get into that, but yeah,
When I say to you, you're already in trouble, right? If I think a movie needs to set the example for what, good means. I think therefore the institution of family is so important.
yeah, yeah.
And I'll say this to you. For me, it was not even, I already said my grandparents were very important, my parents, but my uncles, my aunties, my godparents, who's my mom's youngest 2 siblings, they're twins, they were absolutely fundamental in my life. In especially my teenage years, they helped me understand life better when I was considering certain steps or things. They helped me out. I went on holidays with both of them on many occasions. I was an integral part of their families. And I think that example is far more important than anything you can read or you can see on TV, right? And also the care and love that people show for you, that is why you will change things. That's why you will decide to do something good or bad, right? Because when you know that people care about you, you have, let's say, like this social network and the social support system around you in your family, that is very, very critical. And therefore, I'm also aware that not everybody has this. The
Exactly.
institution of family is very important. It's very important, but it's very complex as well, right? There can be frictions, there can be trauma. I was gonna say earlier, but I didn't. I didn't. I think I've had great role models, but I've also had things in my life that showed me how I did not want it to be when I grew up, right? And where you see trauma, where you see pain, or where you see the result of a bad relationship, or when the institute of family fails,
Yeah, yeah.
that has motivated and inspired me to do it way different now that I am myself a husband and a father, right? Because that, for me, those bad moments or that I've witnessed where I saw the impact on people I cared for, and it really has changed the perspective for me on how to do it differently. And don't underestimate, those people are not that fortunate, because that trauma, I can also see how it long term ends up impacting these people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like infidelity or things like as such. If that happens, it doesn't only impact the spouse, no, it impacts the children even more.
The whole generation, and when they see this, they fail to have strong relationships when they grow up.
Yeah, or they need to break through a vicious cycle, right? Because the one thing and this is something you need to know about me, I do not believe, I think the things that happen to you need to face them head on, and you need to break through that vicious cycle. So if it happens to you, and this is very easy said than done, right? Because some of this stuff is not easy. But the trauma I had to deal with personally, and not to go into the detail and the nitty gritty of that, but I think also around 26, 25, when I decided not to be, how do I best say that in English? I don't want to use the word victimized, but I didn't want to have this burden upon me anymore, right? And I wanted to have a different life. And sometimes that is hard, but you need to choose for different outcomes.
Yeah,
And that means you need to do it differently. You can't let the trauma, it was already done so much to you.
yeah.
You know, you cannot let it
Yeah.
shape the rest of your life,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And therefore you need to step out of that
yeah.
circle.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's easier said than done, don't get me wrong,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
but
So,
that's a bit my mindset.
but something that directly impacts this, so I don't share this quite often, but in that age, what you just mentioned, 25 to 27, something like that. I was in a relationship, in a very, toxic relationship, and it was my I was stuck on making it work, but it wasn't the right thing to do because it robbed away my peace, my growth, my vision, everything away from me. So there came a time when had to jump out of it. It took its toll on me because it's so men are supposed to be like strong, but we are only human, right? And a lot of it has to do with how you were brought up, what circumstances life handed you. And so you can all make mistakes, you can fall victim to things, right? So anyway, long story short, moving away from that was hard. But then I've read something, I watched a few videos from very successful people, and the common thing in that was the most important thing in life that you do that will impact you is choose the person you marry, right? So that's the most important conscious decision you make in your life, which makes or breaks you. So, first of all, I'd like to ask you about marriage and your spouse, your wife, and what has marriage taught you about growth, humility, and self discipline?
Beautiful question. And just to link it real quick to what you just said, I think in life you need to be prepared to meet the person you're going to marry, right? So these good experiences, you need to be grateful for them, because I think when I met my wife, I was ready and I was very convinced about that moment when I met her, that I was, yeah, how do I say, I'm gonna use a big word, but I felt it we were destined to be together when I met her, right? I was very confident because I knew what I wanted and I knew exactly what I didn't want, and I think the two of us had a very good and open conversation around that. And then more importantly, when I met her, next to the fact that I was madly in love and that I loved her, I was in love with my eyes wide open because we were very mature and confident in having that conversation. And also, our value systems connected really well because although we're very different, my wife is Dutch Italian. And I would say the dominant part is Italian because she was born in Canada but grew up in France and in Italy, and then at the later age came to the Netherlands.
Okay.
So it's not a typical, match or a fit from that point of view, but the value systems connected very well. Um, we're both people of faith, which is very important in that sense. And yeah, when I met her, I just knew, and I was very grateful, for that opportunity once it had arrived. I think, we're almost together now for 21 years. We are celebrating 15 years of marriage in 3 weeks.
Wow. Wow.
And
Congratulations.
we're two children down, and to your point, it is in my case the most important relationship. I don't think I would have ever imagined saying that when I was, a 15-year-old or maybe even a 20-year-old, because the people, my grandparents, my mom, my dad, my brother, they were the most important people in my life. But now, she's the most important person in my life. We do everything together. Um, we're a unit. Yeah. So,
And
so it's very important.
yeah, yeah, and you need that in life. These days, we look at everything being talked about individuality, right? So me, my mental health, me, all of that. But we are, as human species, we are supposed to be together. meant to be. That's why we have men and women, right? We complete each other, and we don't care to admit it, but we need each other, right? So building on that, a lot of young men are hesitant about marriage, worried they lose freedom or career momentum. So what would you say to them?
Yeah, I think for me it's actually the opposite. I think for me my marriage has been the foundation upon which I've built my life together with a couple of other building blocks, right? Because I think for me if you put building blocks in place, faith is the most important. I put my family on top of that, and then my marriage is obviously within that, right? And I got into this relationship at a very critical stage in my life because I was graduating for my bachelor, and I was going to do my master. And I think also what paired us well is that we were both very ambitious. But with that, you need to have the understanding, the support, the commitment, and that creates that foundation upon which you then can build, right? Because one of my biggest mentors and my sounding boards is my wife. We talk about everything, when it comes to the career. She understands the world that I am in. I hope I understand hers as well. But we, yeah, we've always had that benefit of talking with each other about these things. When you make big decisions, when you're not doing well, or when you're experiencing some discomfort because you're doing new things and you're growing, the stress,
Yeah.
I've had her to confide in, and that's been essential. And I think therefore it has been a fundament to my growth, if I can answer your question like that. It's really been, yeah, go.
Please, 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 please.
I think from that point of view, it has been absolutely essential for me to make the steps because I didn't have to worry about a lot of other things, right? And I felt supported. And I said this the other week to one of my nephews. I look at my kids and my wife sometimes before I go to work, and I'm motivated and inspired to go and do what I need to do because don't underestimate, they're my why. They're the purpose of why you do things. And I think with my wife I've also had that, in the sense that I look at her and understand why I do the things that I do. We're creating this family, we're creating this life, and we live in London. It's bloody expensive, everything. So you need to make sure you do well. And I think the two of us have, the institution of marriage, it means something very valuable to us, but also we mean a lot to each other. So you're caring for each other, and that care you need if you're gonna do what we do, right? I mean, professional life, corporate life
Yeah.
is at times tough.
Yeah.
It has very high demands of
Yeah.
who you are, and you need to personally, I think, sacrifice quite a bit. And
Yeah.
I think it becomes easier when you know why you're doing it, and also when you're doing it with someone, when you can share that load. That is what I've had with my wife. My wife, in her own right, is doing very well as a professional, but also her personal growth has been something that has really inspired me a lot to look at her make the moves that she made, doing the things that she did, but also that has really benefited me in that sense, right? Because you're learning a lot from each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the growth,
Yeah.
you're pulling each other up. I always say it's been one of the most important upgrades in my life.
Wow, wow, wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. And just quickly touching upon something really important on this topic, friction, right? There are times when our decisions impact our spouse, right? And the other way around as well. In those times, so the first thing we all agree is communication is the very first thing that you start with that. But then when there are things that cause discomfort to one of us, how do you navigate that to keep the sanctity of the relationship?
You're going to make the how do you say it? You're increasing the difficulty of the questions.
It's very important.
Nou, but it is. You know, I'll say something in Dutch. They say, zonder wrijving geen glans. So without friction, there's no shine,
Huh.
right? And in a relationship, you're not always going to agree with each other. You will not always agree with each other. However, there are these things where there is friction, where you just need to go and solve it and you need to sort it out. And that's also, you know, if you truly love and you're a person, if you're truly committed to that, that's an easy thing to do. It's not always going to be easy. And you know, and you have your own big schedule and when you want things and but things need to be done. And then when you see your children, you think they need to do it like X, Y, and Z. And then your wife has a completely different opinion about it.
Oh,
And that's where the friction comes in. And I think that that's okay as long as you respect each other and you make that effort to understand each other. And I'm an emotional person personally, whereas my wife is very calm and collected, very rational about things, right?
yeah.
And I'm very much a man of principle as well. And I will pull those principles at time, you know, I'll play that card. But what I've learned that it's important that, you know, with that friction happens when those disagreements or things happen, you talk about it. Make sure you're both better for it, right? That's also, I think, the beauty of a great relationship. What would you want? Somebody who always says yes, always agrees with you, and also what's the benefit of that? Where's the depth
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
in that? And
Yeah.
you know, that's not real life, if you ask me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think something that helps is a vision of a future together. When you're and there are these times then you take off the bigger picture. We are going somewhere, right? And we can't let this be a problem. So I think having that visioning your future should be part of the deal, right? For young people, they shouldn't trying to marry someone. They shouldn't be.
No, but this, what you're saying, is what I meant earlier, right? I think I was in love with my eyes wide open when I met her, and vice versa. I think you should ask her, but I think because we had a very open and honest conversation. I was not looking for something to be playful or something not serious.
Mm,
And I know she literally said almost the same to me as well. So and then at different stages of your life you have to reinvent the relationship too, is what I've noticed, you know, because when kids come in, you cannot just start parenting. It needs to be a philosophy around it a bit, right? And if the philosophy is not there, it will subliminally be there. So yeah, I think good communication and having a sense of humility too, right? Because you know, when you're growing and you're going through life, my advice to young men would be realize that every time you think you're at the top of the mountain, all of a sudden you need to reinvent yourself again, because life will throw different challenges at you. The children all of a sudden start talking, walking, have a completely different, you know, manual to it. And and this is the beauty of life, but this is also the complexity of it. And in that process, stay humble, be vigilant, but communicate with each other. I've always found that where communication in the relationship was not great, we started having more disagreements because there's less understanding. And I think that is very critical to that aspect. And to your point, that vision,
yeah.
that is something you can only calibrate by talking with each other a lot, right? So and here there's different things, right? Where are you going to go on holiday next year? What are you going to do? Hey, we're going to have a big anniversary. What are the things you're doing? Okay, these are the nice discussions to have.
Yeah.
But then there are also the discussions around what the children need and how you shape and form them to become strong individuals, you know, that can flourish and grow in life. And those are tough conversations to have. So, but again, if you know why you're doing it, you're talking about vision. I like to also call it purpose. You know, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
And what is the example you want to set? What's the tone you want to set for life?
Yeah, and something that directly impacts which we started with and which we're about to get into is your values, who you are as a person, what values you have, and then your partner has some values, and combining that, you see. So sometimes they differ, some values differ. A very good example is how you want to raise kids, right? So you have a certain picture in mind, they have a certain picture in mind, and then you have to respect each other and decide how to progress with it. And then it all goes back to, your own faith, your own values. Your inner self, right? So let's just shift to the inner world. Okay. So where faith and discipline shape how we show up every day. So what role has faith played in your life, and in how you lead, parent, or pursue excellence? So all of this, what's faith's connection in all of this?
Yeah, it's for me personally, it's everything. It's at the foundation of who I am and how I live my life. I it's a very deep question, right? You're asking, because and it's a very personal one too, because I know that this is not everybody's experience of the world, and more importantly, that not everybody agrees. But this is not something where I'm worried whether people agree with me or not, because I consider it, yeah, like I said, everything, right? The fact that I have a relationship with God in my and that God is central to my life. I look outside, as you know, I'm a runner. I see the beauty of the world when I'm running. I try to do the most of it in nature, and you see God in everything, right? It's so profound and beautiful, and the world is so perfect, in the sense that this design, it's blowing, right?
Yeah.
And that has humbled me incredibly to realize that life is so precious, and you're living that life, and it's one of the greatest gifts you have. And therefore, being born in a family where I know my parents, my grandparents are very strong of faith. You in my family, you get born, you get baptized straight away, you do your holy communion. So and when you do that, you form a very strong bond with God, and throughout my life, when I made decisions, when I did things, good or bad, you have that moral compass, right? And I think it has therefore been my guide and my support in everything I do. Even if things are going well, when you have that utter sense of gratitude, I give thanks. When things are going bad, I give thanks and look for support. It's there on the ups and it's there on the downs, and therefore it's very important. I also think for me, in my marriage, to link it back, it is the central thing, right? Because when you get married, you get married in front of God. That's a sacred bond, right? You cannot take that lightly. No, nor would I, right? And that blessing you have, it's what spurs everything after that. So my children are therefore, my greatest blessing, and I'm very grateful for that. But I see that as a result of that. I think how I lead, it's also very much impacted by that. Also, although you're not advertising that, right? And you're not talking about that, because I think in the professional environment. But when people say integrity, for me, it's already important from that point of view, right? Because you look in the mirror, but one day on Judgment Day, you will be judged, right? And the way you treat people, the way you carry yourself. And I had to learn that, to be open with you, throughout life. I think as a young man, and maybe a teenager, being far from perfect when it comes to this, but as you grow and you mature, you understand that you need to lead with integrity, and the way you treat people, the way you do things are very important. And my faith instructs me to do that, right?
Yeah.
Being, love, one of my favorite passages in the Bible is Corinthians, and it says love is kind, love doesn't boast, right? And it describes love the way I said it to you earlier. It's an action. It has nothing to do with a feeling. It's how you treat people,
Yeah.
And for me, therefore, faith, it it's really that red thread throughout my life, and it's also how I do things.
Yeah, and you've made me a bit emotional because faith has to so for people, again, it goes back to how you were raised, what you saw when you were a child. This doesn't happen by chance. You see these things around you in your childhood, and then you adopt them. And then when you start to critically look at the world and how, like, when you this, it's one thing to have a religion and then all connected to the belief systems that you as a Christian would have, I as a Muslim would have. So it's all about belief system.
Yeah.
But then when you critically think about the existence of God and how beautifully the world is, how things work, the connections that are made, it makes you realize that you are just a tiny piece in the puzzle, but a very important one.
A sandcrawler.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're important in your own world, but then in the larger scheme of things, you are supposed to play a role in this world. And hopefully, we do it in a way that those of us who believe in the judgment day, we pass the test, hopefully. And yeah, we make a positive mark while we're living in this world.
But what you're saying now is very important, right? Because you asked me the question. The last part was how it helps you to pursue excellence. It's also like that's the reason why you're here, right? And God is purposeful and how He creates and moves, right? And His grand plan, although we do not understand everything, right? And we'll never understand everything, but this is very important. And therefore, when I do the things I do them with excellence because, or I try because I want to, I like to believe that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right? Because the steps I make, I therefore do that with confidence because I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for God's grace, right? And that's something that is very important to me in how I pursue excellence because I do not want to waste my life, and more importantly, I want to be obedient in that sense, right? In doing what needs to be done, and that's maybe sometimes not easy, and I also think the things worth having in life and the things worth fighting for are not, they don't come easy, and I don't think that therefore God gives you a lot, but you need to go out there and do with it.
Yeah, yeah.
My cousin says it really great. I was talking with her this morning, and you know faith is nothing without good works, because the things we do and how we treat each other ultimately is what's very critical. And to your point, is it a system, or is it a system upon which you are acting, right? And then that system becomes very valuable and very important.
Yeah.
And that is also why I think faith is so important, because it yeah, it instructs you to do good, to be good.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. And you connecting it to something you mentioned earlier, running. You've been running quite recently, the London Marathon and the South African one as well. So, what's the connection between endurance sports and mental resilience for you?
It's funny you're saying that, right? Endurance sport and mental resilience, there is a very strong correlation, because I think if your mindset is not in the right place, you cannot endure, right? And therefore, running, I picked running up 3 years ago, and I've always enjoyed running as a football player. In the off season, to stay fit, I ran, but never those crazy distances that I thought they were always worse, and now I'm doing them. But I think the mindset is everything when you're running, and especially if you're doing longer distance. The marathon I did in South Africa, it's called Comrades, and you have an up and a down version, and I did the down version, and it's 90 kilometers in very hilly circumstances. I mean, it's tough. And there I've learned how to connect with the deeper self. Again, my faith being very important. You do not want to know how how often and how frequent I was praying during that race because it was tough. But long story very short, the mindset, I up until that point I did that race. Like I did London in April and then I did this in June. I'd never ran past 50 kilometers. So just having the sheer belief, right? Should also say my coach plays a very important role there because that's somebody who believed that I could do it based on the training I'd done. That's a very important vote of confidence you get.
Yeah, yeah.
But I also think ultimately you have to do it, right? So it's the mindset you have around these things. And are you willing to put yourself in positions where, you're going to have to grow and where you're coming out of your comfort zone to do something you've never done? And again, this is where my faith is very, very important to me because for me the running is a bit spiritual because it's just when you're running you're going to do either one of two things. You're going to talk with yourself or you're going to talk with God,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. You,
And it's you, the road, and that's it, right? And you can have people around you, but when you're training, it's a very lonely existence. But I don't experience it as such, so it helps me calibrate and sharpen the mindset, and because of that, I can endure.
beautiful, beautiful. And when you talk about endurance, and obviously it comes with its generally in personal and professional life as well. There are seasons of pressure, right? How do you stay anchored during those times when there's pressure? So how do you handle that?
Well, it's funny because I think we can link it back first to my family. That's why family is so important. You have these pressure moments in life and things don't go well, and the pressure can also be in the family, don't get me wrong. When your parents or people are not doing well or people pass away, it's tough. But I think you need to know why you're doing things, and you need to have the right people around you to deal with those things. And I think for me the pressure, it's part of life and you have to embrace it when it comes, and you cannot walk away from it. In the case that you're walking away from it, it's on your path because it needs to be on your path, right? So that's my philosophy. And yeah, I try to deal with it by making sure I live a balanced life.
Hmm.
Hence why the running is so important for me. It gives me a moment where I can calibrate, process, and do what I need to do just to make sure, I'm better for it. But I also think equally having fun, with your children. I'm about to go on a summer holidays and the moment to reconnect, spend a lot of time together to do fun things, go for meals together. You have breakfast, lunch, and dinner together. So I think find balance in your life, and make sure you're ready to deal with that pressure when it comes. And you know, I always say when in Dutch they have a great saying: "A rested man counts for two." Right? And meaning if you're rested and you're ready for it. I think that's very important that you live a balanced life so that when pressure arrives, you can deal with it. And sometimes it's prolonged, over time, the pressure.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's a season in your life. And again, this is where I ask God for guidance and help.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. S- all right, let's have a time for a quick fire questions to close it out. So, are you ready?
Yep.
Okay, let's do it. A moment where family changed your life.
A moment where family changed my life. Yeah, I think with the birth of my children, I mean, you go from being very, happy together to being. People had said it's the most beautiful experience in your life, and then you're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, my wedding was great, and then your children are born. It's magical. It's like you've always known them, when you're holding them. And yeah, definitely the most beautiful moment in my life so far, and definitely the most profound changes in my life.
Beautiful. I second that. I second that.
Yeah, as a young father, you
Yeah,
have
yeah,
to, right?
yeah. I couldn't agree more. So, okay, a verse or book that reshaped your leadership.
A word or book that reshaped my leadership. I think I read David Meister, the trusted advisor, at a young age. Actually, my auntie gave me that book, and it's a book about professional life. And I read that book, and I knew I was either going to be a banker, a consultant, or a lawyer, but one of the few, one of the professions I mentioned, I knew when I read that book, and that really changed my life. And I read this book recently again, and I actually gave an internal lecture at BTS, or a session, a workshop based on components of it, on how valuable relationships are in the workplace, but also with your clients.
Yeah.
And that book is impressive if I think about it, because that has been around for a couple of decades.
Okay.
And this guy, he knew what he was talking about back then,
Perfect.
because these are the ingredients of how to develop strong client relationships. And that book has really, still to this day, influences certain elements of how I approach that element in my job.
Wow. Sounds very useful. We'll place that here on the screen for our audience as well. So something running taught you that nothing else did.
I think I think I've always understood what sacrifice and discipline and consistency meant, but this has taken it for me to a whole other level. Because living the life I live professionally, with and also the family life I have with two young children, being married, having parents, having loads of nieces and nephews, you want to make time for everything. But running requires you to be consistent and to be extremely disciplined, and therefore you need to really have a very strong mindset. And I think the running has really given me that. For Yeah, I would say that's the one thing. In life, I was not a stranger to sacrifice and to having to leave things to do things, right? But running has really, really forced me to rethink that, and there's levels to this, is what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine. And then especially when it's such a long, the ones you've run, I think you have your body suffers through a lot as well, and your body tells you a lot as well. So I can.
I was gonna make a quick joke. You know what it has really given me? I'm in much better shape, and I think I lost like 7, 8, 9 kilos at least. So yeah, so that's the other thing it has given me, a lot of good, healthy lifestyle and balance. Because let me say it to you like this: the marathon, it's brutal, and there's no luck. What shows up on the day is what you put in. So there's no luck factor. That's also with the mindset. If you've done the work, you've done the training, you've been consistent, you've been disciplined, that's what you bring with you, and that's what you need to unlock, your success.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely brutal, because what shows up on the day is what you put in. There's no luck. "Oh, today I feel great." No, because at 35, 40K, you start feeling horrible. It's purely mental resilience and grit that gets you through.
Also, the training your heart and lungs go through during the training sessions. So I think you can't really do that on day one. What you do on the marathon.
Absolutely.
So okay, last one. What would your 25-year-old self be surprised you're doing now?
It's funny, because in a way I've always, I think, been this guy a bit, if I'm really honest with you. But I think the discipline, the consistency, and the rigor with which I live my life now, and the level at which maybe the 25-year-old, because I was very playful at times and a bit naive, way more serious. I think I'm literally 20 years down, right? I turned 45 a couple of weeks ago. From that point of view, it's quite humbling to be where I'm at, and because you feel so blessed and grateful. Two children, I've been married for 15 years. Both my parents are still around, which is very important to me. And I think, enjoying life, I knew back then that that was important and that you need to value it, but now I've come to understand it's even more important. It literally, I would tell myself, enjoy the journey. Do not focus too much on the destination. Enjoy the journey, and make the most out of every day, and all the experiences you go through, because they will change, and things get a bit more serious, if you're older, especially when you start having kids, as you know. You know, yeah, it becomes, life becomes far more serious, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't enjoy it, right? That you should not have that gratification at times.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. And finally, to the young man listening who wants to build a strong life but doesn't know where to start. So, what's one principle from faith, family, or running that could ground him as he builds?
Know yourself and get to know yourself. Don't walk away from understanding who you are and who you should become, because that for me has been the accelerator when I understood that. And I'm still learning, I'm still discovering that. But the inner essence of who you are and who you are meant to be, and that brings everything you mentioned together, right? Because that's for me a matter of faith, that's a matter of family, that's the matter of the identity I have with my family. You need to rise to the occasion as a man at some point, but in order to do that you need to know who you are and what you do. And I always say to people that can slightly change at different stages of your life, so don't walk away from that, and confront yourself with that question and dig deep to understand that, because that is so valuable, because once you understand that, you can go in fifth gear and you're flying through life, because if you know who you are and why you're doing it, it's a very powerful thing.
Thank you, Willem. This conversation has sparked a lot of things. I do this quite often, but on this certain topic, this is a more personal topic. So having this conversation and what you've done with such grace and showing us that leadership isn't just about boardrooms or platforms. It starts at the dinner table, in prayer, and in miles run quietly at dawn. So thank you for being here. Really appreciate it.
No, and thank you. And I think it's important, we share our knowledge and wisdom with the next generation. And more importantly, I am also, very keen to learn more. So thank you as well for allowing us to learn more on your platform. And let's keep in touch. I hope. Yeah, I was sorry to not meet you in Amsterdam when you were there, but if
No,
you're ever in London, let me
I'm
know.
coming to London in January, so we'll meet.
Good. Thank you so much, Mohammed.
Thank you, Willem. Thank you. And to every man, every young man listening, don't overlook the power of leading through love, commitment, and small acts of discipline. Family is not a constraint, it's a calling. If I give you my own example, as young men, what we face during these times, during this age, it's only natural. We have to go through certain things. But once you do, once you realize what you don't want and what you it's clear, it's more clear that what you want, what you need in life. So the important thing is to make that decision, because if you keep on thinking, keep on postponing it, you will never be able to get it done and you will lose a lot of precious time. It doesn't mean you won't be able to recover from it, but better to do it as soon as you can rather than late. Yeah. So get married, but before, know who you are, what you want, so that you can be of value and service to who you marry and your generation to come. So thank you for staying here. We'll catch you in the next one.